Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of like absolute undeniable precision.
Right, like engineering.
Yeah, exactly. Like you break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen. The doctor just points and says, there it is, broken.
It's a binary state, broken or not broken. It's clean and fundamentally it's comforting.
It is comforting.
Yeah.
Because we desperately want complex problems to be visible and, easily categorized.
Mm-hmm.
But then you step into the world of how entire societies function, and it's a mess.
Oh, entirely. The X-ray machine is utterly useless there.
Right. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is murky, it's complex, and filled with overlapping symptoms. And that brings us to the mission for today's deep dive.
Because for over a century, we've organized human beings into pyramids.
Yes, pyramids. We see it everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
In corporate org charts, wealth distribution, educational systems, even massive government bureaucracies.
We do. And today we are taking a massive stack of structural theories, visual models, and urban case studies to explore why that specific geometric shape, the pyramid, mathematically guarantees eventual collapse.
Which sounds intense, but it's crucial. And more importantly, we are charting a profound 3D transition away from that fragile architecture.
Moving toward a resilient, multidimensional model that the sources refer to as the diamond.
So welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Let's just unpack this right away. Why does the literal shape of our mental models dictate whether a civilization thrives or falls apart?
Well, it really is a fundamental rewiring of how we perceive progress and capability and, honestly, survival.
Yeah, because when you look closely at the sources,
Yeah.
you realize that societal failure isn't usually about bad intentions.
Right, which is our default assumption. We have this tendency to look at a failing city or a stagnant company or, a collapsing institution and immediately assume there must be malicious actors at the helm.
Or some profound moral rot taking place.
Exactly. But the analysis points to something much more mechanical. It's about structural geometry.
The default architecture of fragility. I like that phrasing.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that default, because the pyramid, it absolutely dominates our thinking.
It is baked into our collective subconscious.
It really is. You think about the models you've encountered your entire life, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yep, a pyramid.
Right, placing basic survival at the bottom and self-actualization at this tiny, exclusive peak.
And corporate organizational structures are the exact same way, A massive base of entry-level workers supporting middle management who support senior management, all holding up one CEO.
And the inherent assumptions baked into that geometric shape are, well, they're incredibly limiting when you stop to actually look at them.
They are. Because the pyramid intrinsically assumes that value requires scarcity.
Right. It operates on the premise that progress is strictly vertical. Like you start at the bottom and you fight your way up.
And it just accepts completely without question that only a select few will ever reach the top.
While the vast majority of humanity is structurally destined to remain at the bottom, just serving as load-bearing support rather than, shared capability.
The geometry demands it. A pyramid relies entirely on a tiny apex to hold the narrative and the power structure together, while the mass of the structure merely supports it.
It's an architecture where the base is meant to bear the weight, not direct the energy.
Exactly.
But I do want to push back on that slightly, though, because if we look at modern business strategy, you have someone like C.K. Prahalad.
Oh, sure, the bottom of the pyramid theory.
Yeah. He wrote that incredibly influential theory about the bottom of the pyramid as this massive, overlooked source of untapped economic capacity and entrepreneurial energy.
He did, yes.
He was basically arguing that corporations need to stop ignoring the base. So isn't recognizing the inherent value of the bottom a step in the right direction? It completely shifted how multinationals viewed emerging markets.
Prahalad's insight was profound for its time, no question. He forced the corporate and economic world to look at billions of people not merely as dependents or charity cases.
Right, but as capable actors and consumers.
Yes. But if you look at the underlying structural intent of his theory, what was the ultimate goal? It was to integrate those billions of people more efficiently into the existing structure.
Oh, I see.
It still fundamentally accepted the pyramid shape as the unquestioned reality of human organization.
Wow. Okay, so it was a better pyramid, but still a pyramid.
Exactly. To solve the fragility problem our sources are highlighting, we have to apply Buckminster Fuller's principle.
Oh, I love this quote. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.
Precisely. We shouldn't be trying to figure out how to manage the bottom of the pyramid more humanely or how to extract slightly more value from it.
We should be adopting a structural geometry that makes the concept of a bottom completely obsolete.
Yes, which leads us to Bloom's taxonomy.
Right. Because we've all been conditioned by things like Bloom's taxonomy to view human development as this vertical climb.
If you look at the traditional Bloom's pyramid, you start at the bottom with basic knowledge, just memorizing facts.
And the implication is that this is lowly work.
Right. Then you climb up to comprehension.
And then application is just like a stepping stone you pass on the way to abstract, higher order thinking, like analysis or synthesis.
The climbing metaphor implies that actual hands-on application is subordinate to theory.
But when the sources map Bloom's categories onto this new 3D diamond model, it fundamentally changes the center of gravity.
It really does. Application is no longer a mid-level rung on a ladder you're trying to escape.
Right. In a diamond, application becomes the functional center. It's the widest, most voluminous part of the entire shape.
Because learning isn't a linear climb, it's an expansion. You gather knowledge and comprehension, which funnel directly into the broad center of application.
And from that real-world, friction-heavy application, you expand outward into analysis and synthesis.
Exactly. Evaluation isn't a crown you wear at the tiny apex of a pyramid. It's a continuous feedback loop integrated into the entire cycle of doing.
Which totally validates how we actually acquire skill in the real world.
Yes. You don't just read a manual on civil engineering and then become a master builder.
Right. You design something, you try to build it, you mess up, the materials fail, you reevaluate, you apply it again.
The center of gravity is the doing. Which brings us to the core ambition of this entire framework, creating the middle strong society.
The middle strong society. This is the critical geometric shift, right?
It is. In a diamond society, the middle is broad, it's capable, and it's highly resilient.
You are no longer dealing with a tiny, isolated elite supported by a massive, struggling base.
Right. The vast majority of the population, the resources, and the decision-making capacity occupy that highly functional center.
And mathematically, this is why it prevents societal collapse.
Because a pyramid is inherently unstable under stress.
Yeah, if the tiny apex fails, if the elite leadership becomes corrupt or incompetent or simply makes a massive strategic error, the whole thing crumbles.
Or, conversely, if the base can no longer bear the load of taxation or labor, it fractures.
But a diamond persists because competence isn't hoarded at the top. It's distributed widely across the middle.
Exactly. When your society is diamond-shaped, your tax base stabilizes naturally because economic capacity is distributed.
And social trust increases exponentially, doesn't it?
It does, because people are interacting with peers who share capability, rather than looking up with resentment or looking down with pity.
Dependency drops. It is simply a mathematically and structurally more stable architecture for any human civilization.
But a diamond isn't just an empty glass shell.
Right. You can't just draw a diamond on a whiteboard and say, well, we fixed society. We have to look at the inside-out engine that actually powers it.
How do you construct this geometry internally?
Yeah, how does it work?
You don't start by rearranging organizational charts. You start by implementing a specific, continuous process.
The sources outline an 8-stage internal cycle that forms the literal engine of this diamond.
And this cycle is what anchors the entire society.
So rather than just listing these 8 stages mechanically, let's look at how they actually function. The stages are task, plan, develop, implement, assess, reflect, learn, and character.
But reading them like a list misses the point entirely.
Totally. This draws heavy inspiration from operational models you see in the military or, in high-end manufacturing.
It borrows heavily from the ODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. Which fighter pilots use to make split-second decisions.
Right. And it also borrows from PDCA cycles in quality management. Plan, do, check, act.
Those are brilliant for tactical execution, but the diamond cycle crucially adds 2 elements that those standard operational models almost always leave out.
Character and identity.
Yes.
In this framework, character isn't just some moral hope. It's not a list of core values you pay a PR firm to design and then stick on a break room poster.
No, character is a structural output.
It is the cumulative result of what you become after running through the other 7 stages of the cycle over and over again under pressure.
And that cycle doesn't exist in a vacuum. Society operates across 4 distinct spheres.
Politics, economics, the physical environment, and the social milieu.
What's fascinating here is how the 8-stage cycle anchors these 4 spheres as functional triads.
Now, you might be listening and thinking this sounds like a partisan issue. But if you look at the framework, it takes absolutely no political sides.
None. Left, right, center, it does not matter.
This is purely about structural capacity. So let's look at that first sphere, politics.
In this structural context, politics is not about electoral partisanship. It is the sphere that defines who we are.
It establishes shared values, collective direction, and the ultimate mandate of the society or organization.
Right. In the Diamond model, politics operates as a triad composed of character, task, and planning.
I really want to spend some time on this because understanding how those three link up is the key to the whole system. How does character dictate task?
Yeah. Let's look at it through the lens of a historical organization. Your collective character, your true operational identity, absolutely dictates the task you define.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, if an organization's internal character is defined purely by short-term, quarter-over-quarter extraction of wealth, the task they define for themselves will inevitably be short-term cost-cutting.
Oh, I see. They might frame the task for the public as maximizing shareholder value.
Exactly, but structurally the task is extraction. And that specific task sets rigid boundaries for the next stage, which is planning.
Right, because you cannot plan a 20-year sustainable infrastructure project if your defined task is immediate extraction.
You physically can't do it. The system won't allow it.
So politics defines the what and the why based on who you actually are, not who you claim to be.
Correct. And then we move into the economic sphere, which is how we actually resource the action.
The economics triad consists of planning, development, and implementation.
Once the political sphere has defined the plan, economic planning takes over to determine how resources, money, labor, raw materials, time are going to be deployed.
Which flows directly into development.
Yes.
And development here isn't just like software development or real estate. It's building human capital.
It's establishing the institutions, training the workforce, designing the supply chains. It's building the capacity to act.
Which finally leads to implementation. You execute the task.
You deploy the resources, you build the bridge, launch the product, or roll out the healthcare policy.
But, and this is a brilliant economic plan doesn't mean anything if the raw materials don't physically exist, or if a hurricane wipes out the supply chain.
Exactly. Which brings us to the physical environment.
It's like designing a state-of-the-art aerospace engine entirely on a supercomputer. The math is flawless. The economic plan is fully funded.
But when you actually build it in the real world and turn it on, the physical heat melts the metal.
The physical environment provides the ultimate unavoidable friction.
That is the perfect analogy. The physical environment triad is implementation, assessment, and reflection.
Because implementation always faces hard physical limits.
You might have a perfectly funded economic plan for regional agriculture, but if the soil is depleted, the aquifers are dry, and it doesn't rain.
The physical environment pushes back violently.
It does. The environment does not care about your budget, and it does not care about your political rhetoric.
It forces a reckoning.
It forces an honest assessment. Because of that physical friction, you have to measure what actually happened on the ground against what you planned in the boardroom.
And that honest assessment demands reflection. Why did the aerospace engine melt? Why did the crop fail?
Was our plan flawed, or did we lack the developmental capacity?
And that brutal honesty flows perfectly into the final sphere.
The social milieu. This is how we live together.
The social triad is reflection, learning, and character. So society reflects on the assessments. We debate it in the media. We write legislation about it. Citizens feel the consequences of the failed crops or the melted engine in their daily lives.
And from that deep societal reflection, we extract learning. We turn raw experience into institutional memory.
And those lessons, internalized and compounded over time, forge our collective character.
Which, as we establish, feeds right back into the political sphere to define the next task.
So just to be crystal clear, these spheres are not siloed departments. The economics team doesn't just hand off a manila folder to the physical environment team and say, well, good luck.
Not at all. It is an integrated, continuous cascade.
A political decision changes economic resourcing, which inevitably creates physical impacts on the ground.
Which alters the social lived experience, which ultimately reshapes the political character of the nation.
If one gear stops turning, the whole system seizes up. Okay, but what forces them to actually turn like gears without slipping? Because anyone who has worked in corporate America or government has seen brilliant cyclical diagrams drawn on whiteboards, and then absolutely nothing changes in reality.
We've all seen those whiteboards.
Right. So the answer in our sources lies in how the opposite points of the diamond create friction.
Yes. We're replacing metaphor with a strict mechanics here. The sources refer to this as the theory of opposites.
Inside the 3D diamond, the stages that sit directly across from each other geometrically aren't just philosophical contrasts.
No, they are strict operational criteria. Each stage creates the exact conditions by which its opposite stage must be judged.
Wait, I'm losing you a bit here. How does a task judge an assessment? Aren't they happening at completely different times in the cycle? One is at the very beginning in the political sphere, and the other is way over in the physical environment sphere.
It's about setting the parameters for accountability. Let's look at the first opposite pairing. Task and assessment. If a mayor defines a completely vague, politically safe task, like, we are going to make this city more livable and green, your assessment phase a year later is going to be completely fuzzy.
Right. How do you measure more livable?
You can't. It's performative.
Performative governance. We see a ton of that. They plant one tree in a park and declare victory because the task was so vague it couldn't be failed.
Exactly. But if the task is structurally sound, like reduce water leakage in the downtown grid by 15% in 18 months using local labor.
Oh, that task writes its own assessment rubric.
Yes. If you hit 18 months and the leakage is only reduced by 4%, you failed. A clear task forces a brutal assessment. The opposite points hold each other accountable.
That makes total sense. And the next opposite pairing is plan and reflection.
Plans document your assumptions about reality. You assume raw materials will cost X, that labor will take Y hours, and that the public will respond in Z way.
And reflection is where you systematically test if those assumptions survived contact with reality.
Right. If you didn't write a rigorous, detailed plan, you have absolutely nothing to reflect upon when the project goes sideways. You just have chaos.
Which means you just end up pointing fingers.
Exactly. Then we have develop and learn.
How do those oppose each other?
Well, development generates testable experience. You train a rapid response team, or you run a localized pilot program for a new transit system.
And learning is the mechanism that takes that raw developmental experience and converts it into permanent institutional memory.
Because development without learning is just endless repetitive training. It's building a new pilot program every 3 years from scratch because the institution forgot what it learned the last time.
Wow, yeah, we see that constantly. And the final pairing, which is arguably the most critical, implement and character.
Because action under pressure reveals true capability.
Character isn't forged in a political speech. It is exposed when things go horribly wrong on the ground during implementation.
If your implementation involves quietly cutting corners on building materials to hit an arbitrary economic deadline, your organizational character is exposed as lacking integrity.
Regardless of what your political triad claims your values are.
Exactly. Implementation is the ultimate mirror for character.
To really ground this, let's look at a deep dive case study from the sources where this inside-out build functioned perfectly.
The city of Curitiba in Brazil.
Yes, and their massive transport reforms starting in the 1970s.
Curitiba is the gold standard in urban planning literature, precisely because they intuitively followed this exact diamond cycle, avoiding the trap of the pyramid.
In the 1970s, Curitiba's population was exploding. The standard urban planning playbook at the time, which is heavily pyramid-based, heavily reliant on securing massive top-down funding from the federal government or international banks, said you had to dig a subway.
That was the hallmark of a modern city.
But digging a subway takes decades. It causes massive physical disruption and requires capital they simply did not have.
Under a pyramid model, they would have either buried themselves in debt to build a tiny fraction of a subway system that only served the wealthy elites, or they would have done nothing.
Instead, they defined a very clear task in their political sphere. Move the maximum number of people efficiently, affordably, and sustainably using existing street-level infrastructure.
And that clear task dictated a radically different plan. Their development phase wasn't about contracting foreign engineering firms to dig tunnels.
They innovated bus rapid transit, or BRT. They built the buses locally.
They designed these iconic raised tubular boarding stations that allowed for subway-style prepaying and rapid boarding.
Which completely eliminated the bottleneck of paying the driver.
Then came implementation. They redesigned the physical environment, dedicating massive central arterial lanes exclusively for these buses.
They created the physical reality of the plan, accepting the friction it caused with standard car traffic.
But the crucial part is that they didn't stop there.
No, they ran the cycle. They hit the assessment phase.
They meticulously measured passenger flow, boarding times, fuel efficiency, and traffic reduction.
which forced reflection and learning. When they saw a bottleneck, they didn't write a political speech about it. They adjusted the routes and the station designs based on actual observed user behavior.
And what was the ultimate structural output? The character of the city fundamentally changed.
It developed a fiercely proud civic culture of innovation, ecological awareness, and public service that has lasted for generations.
The functional triads worked perfectly in sync. The opposites, task and assessment, plan and reflection, held each other accountable.
They proved that building from the inside out creates a deeply resilient diamond.
They did.
But what happens when those gears slip?
That's the danger.
Right, what happens when a society or an institution intentionally bypasses those opposites, when assessment is avoided because it's politically inconvenient?
We slide from that ideal functional diamond into a dangerous state of decay.
We enter what the sources call the collapse cascade. And this always begins with a widespread systemic loss of competence.
We see this competence gap everywhere today.
Absolutely. We have massive credential inflation.
Yeah.
Everyone in the bureaucracy has a master's degree in public policy, but nobody knows how to actually fix the municipal water treatment plant when a valve breaks.
You have managerial feudalism, where organizations hire 15 vice presidents of strategy for every one engineer actually doing the work.
It creates an environment of pure bureaucratic overload. We have incredibly dense rule books, endless compliance checklists, mandatory training modules.
But an absolute staggering inability to execute physical tasks in the real world.
So how does the diamond model explain this specific type of decay?
The sources map this out on the operational plane as the legacy gray diamond.
Gray diamond.
Yes. The term gray here refers to stagnation, a lack of energy, a heavy dragging weight. When competence erodes, a highly predictable psychological and systemic sequence occurs across the four spheres.
It's a downward spiral that feeds on itself.
And the spiral starts in the political sphere with anxiety.
Politics devolves into anxiety.
Yes. When leaders in the political or executive sphere lack the actual grounded knowledge or competence to fulfill their roles, deep uncertainty replaces confidence.
They feel exposed. They don't know how the engine works.
So, to protect themselves from being found out, they begin prioritizing personal loyalty over operational capability.
So they surround themselves with sycophants who will tell them what they want to hear, rather than experts who might challenge their assumptions.
Exactly. And because the leadership is paralyzed by anxiety, that bleeds directly into the economic sphere, which leads to avoidance.
Because the political mandate is anxious and unpredictable, economic decisions that require courage, long-term commitment, and capital risk are indefinitely postponed.
Planning becomes entirely superficial. No one in the bureaucracy wants to be the one holding the bag if a 10-year infrastructure project fails, so they just avoid making any hard choices at all.
Resources are diverted away from long-term capacity building and spent entirely on short-term optics to placate the anxious leadership.
But like we said with the aerospace engine, the physical environment does not care about your optics or your anxiety.
Which brings us to accusation.
Reality cannot be postponed forever. Eventually, the deferred maintenance catches up. The physical environment strikes back.
The roads crumble, the power grid fails during a storm, the water pipes burst.
Because honest assessment was bypassed by avoidance in the economic sphere, the institution is caught completely off guard.
Instead of reflecting on their systemic failure, they look for a scapegoat. Accusation replaces assessment.
It's always the previous administration's fault. Or it's the weather's fault.
Or it's a lack of federal funding. Or it's a specific demographic's fault. The blame game goes into overdrive because assessing the actual failure would expose the incompetence.
And this endless toxic cycle of failure and accusation dumps directly into the social milieu, resulting in profound apathy.
Apathy. After years of broken promises, crumbling infrastructure, and watching leaders accuse each other on television while nothing actually gets fixed in their neighborhoods, citizens lose confidence.
In a corporate setting, employees completely disengage. Mediocrity becomes deeply normalized.
The society doesn't just lose its competence. It loses the fundamental belief that improvement is even conceptually possible.
Our sources give a brilliant, albeit depressing, cautionary tale of a fictionalized municipality called Riverton that perfectly illustrates this gray diamond collapse cascade.
Yeah, Riverton is a composite of dozens of real-world municipal failures. They tried to implement a cyclical reform plan to revitalize their downtown.
It looked incredible on paper, But structurally, they were entirely trapped in the gray diamond. They had 4 mayors in 8 years.
That is the anxiety phase mapped perfectly to reality. Because the leadership kept changing, the political task kept changing every 2 years to suit the new mayor's election promises.
And because the task kept changing, the economic planners couldn't commit to anything. Avoidance set in.
Plans became completely disconnected from actual physical capacity. When the downtown revitalization projects inevitably ran massively over budget and stalled out, city administrators literally instructed their staff to hide the cost overruns.
They published public dashboards showing 100% compliance.
They politicized the data. That is, accusation replacing honest assessment. They altered the metrics to protect their own jobs instead of fixing the concrete that was cracking in the plaza.
And the result was entirely predictable. Public trust in Riverton vanished, businesses left, apathy set in.
The cycle was completely broken, and the city entered a state of managed decline.
It means you can have the diamond framework perfectly drawn on a PowerPoint slide, but without a fundamental cultural commitment to honest assessment, you just get performative governance.
You get what political scientists refer to as a kakistocracy.
Kakistocracy. Rule by the incompetent or the least qualified.
It happens inevitably when the structural links between capability, responsibility, and accountability are permanently severed by anxiety and avoidance.
But we cannot just stay in the gray diamond. It is structurally fatal.
How do we pull ourselves out of this spiral of apathy and accusation?
We have to transition along this operational plane to what the sources call the high-frequency red diamond.
This requires a 3D transition. Imagine the operational plane, the flat surface where society exists.
The gray diamond is the heavy, dragging, stagnant bottom half, pulling society downward into decay.
And the red diamond is the ballooning, active, high-frequency top half, pulling society upward into continuous renewal.
And high frequency here refers to the speed and rigor of the assessment and reflection loops.
We have to replace those 4 negative A's, anxiety, avoidance, accusation, apathy, with 4 dynamic dimensions of renewal.
These 4 dimensions must operate across all spheres simultaneously. First, we must replace the anxiety in politics with awareness.
Awareness means seeing the system exactly as it is, not as we wish it was for a press release.
It requires brutally honest internal assessments, transparent institutions, and the structural capacity to recognize early signals of stress long before they become catastrophic crises.
You cannot be paralyzed by anxiety if you are fully aware of reality and confident in your operational capability to handle it.
Second, we replace avoidance in economics with anticipation.
Anticipation means looking ahead of the current crisis.
It's modeling different long-term futures, creating resilient resource strategies, and acting decisively before scarcity hits. It is the exact structural opposite of postponing hard decisions.
Third, we replace accusation in the physical environment with accountability.
Accountability is about linking authority directly to competence.
It means setting brutally clear expectations through the task and ensuring there are real structural consequences when things are neglected.
You do not get to blame a 100-year rainstorm for flooding the downtown if you systematically avoided maintaining the stormwater drains for a decade.
Accountability forces the friction back into the system.
And finally, we replace apathy in society with adaptability.
Adaptability is the capacity to learn from physical experience, to rapidly redesign systems after a failure, and to encourage constant localized innovation over rigid ideological adherence.
An adaptable society doesn't become apathetic when a policy fails. It digests the lesson, adjusts the plan, and tries again with higher competence.
I want to dive deep into a real-world success story that embodies this red diamond, specifically regarding environmental stewardship and becoming an anticipatory state. We have to look at Singapore's water management strategy.
Singapore is a brilliant, undeniable example of the red diamond in action.
Structurally, they are an island nation with incredibly limited natural freshwater resources.
Under a legacy gray diamond model, this geographic reality would lead to intense political anxiety, avoidance of the massive infrastructure costs, and eventually, moral accusation.
Blaming citizens for taking long showers when the reservoirs inevitably ran dry.
But they didn't fall into the collapse cascade. They utilized anticipation at a level most governments can't even fathom.
They instituted 50-year land use and water modeling. They didn't just build one dam, they massively diversified their supply.
They built cutting-edge desalination plants. They pioneered new water, which is the massive psychological and physical undertaking of recycling wastewater back into ultra-pure drinking water.
They negotiated long-term imports, while simultaneously building the infrastructure to make those imports unnecessary.
They align their governance cycle with the actual slow rhythms of natural ecological systems.
They didn't wait to react to fast ecological feedback, like a drought, with slow, anxious bureaucracy. They anticipated it. We also have a smaller scale, but equally profound example from the sources. A municipality called Greenhaven.
Greenhaven is the perfect example of increasing the frequency of the cycle.
They recognized they were sliding into the gray diamond, so they replaced their bloated 200-page strategic planning documents, which are usually just massive exercises in avoidance and bureaucratic cover,
with 12-page, highly specific operational plans.
And instead of those dreadful quarterly meetings where everyone just reads from a script and points fingers at other departments, they instituted weekly, 90-minute, high-frequency review cycles.
This is what high frequency means in the red diamond. You tighten the loop.
In those 90-minute meetings, they measured failures openly, strictly without punishment, specifically to flag physical risks early.
They built awareness and adaptability directly into their weekly operational rhythm.
They didn't wait a year to find out a project was failing. They found out on Tuesday and adjusted the plan on Wednesday. That is the red diamond in action.
It changes everything when you see it applied like that.
It really does. Let's synthesize this journey we've been on. We started by deconstructing the fragile pyramid, this outdated, dangerous geometry that assumes scarcity, forces vertical progress, and relies entirely on a tiny, vulnerable apex.
We realized we can't just manage the bottom of the pyramid better. We have to abandon the shape entirely.
We replaced it by building the diamond from the inside out. We established that the core is an 8-stage cycle. Task, plan, develop, implement, assess, reflect, learn, and character.
And we showed how character is not an input, but the ultimate structural output.
We mapped that cycle to the 4 spheres of society, politics, economics, the physical environment, and the social milieu, demonstrating how they operate as deeply interdependent functional triads.
A change in one ripples through them all.
We examined how the theory of opposites creates strict operational criteria, forcing honest assessment, revealing true character through implementation, and preventing performative governance.
And then we traced the operational plane, charting the terrifying downward spiral of the legacy gray diamond: anxiety, avoidance, accusation, and apathy.
And how to pull ourselves up into the high-frequency red diamond of awareness, anticipation, accountability, and adaptability.
It is a comprehensive, mathematically sound blueprint for civilizational resilience. It proves that the middle strong society is not a utopian dream. It is a structural necessity.
It really is. And I want to leave you listening right now with a final provocative challenge that is rooted deeply in the sources we explored today.
That's an important one.
The Diamond Framework teaches us a hard truth. Friends and external enemies only impact us in exact proportion to our internal structural strength.
The environment only breaks what is already structurally fragile.
So look closely at your own organization, your own local community government, or even your own personal operational habits. Are you relying on a tiny apex of sheer willpower or elite leadership to hold up a fragile pyramid? Or are you actively, continuously cycling through brutal, honest assessment and reflection to build a middle strong diamond?
Because remember, character isn't a PR statement you can just declare. It is the ultimate, undeniable output of a completed cycle.
Thank you for joining this deep dive into the structural geometry of civilization. Keep asking the big questions.